one of the first things I want to focus on here is that I don't just want to talk about how to make sales to millennials, but the focus here is, why do they matter and how should you convert them? So hopefully I don't have to convince you that millennials matter. They're a huge market. We're going to talk about that some. But when I say convert, what I actually mean is not can I sell to them, but rather can they be a follower? Are they someone that can be an evangelist for me? And how are all of the ways that we can actually utilize them for your brand? So a little bit about me. As she was saying, everyone laughs when they say my last name because Higuera, you don't pronounce the H. Obviously, I'm married. My second last name is Giraldo, which is a G pronounced like an H. I think it's very, very confusing. I run this organization with my husband, Danny, and my dog named Armando. So one thing I will start with is if you've gone to my website or if you want to go to my website after this, I'm going to speak a lot about storytelling. So I say these things and I give you this background on myself initially because this is what really matters to millennials. When we're talking about, what we're purchasing, we care about the people, we care about where it came from. There's a reason that I have a LinkedIn for Armando. He has a profile that says his favorite part of wine tasting is eating the cheese and the charcuterie after. So that's a bit about my background. Obviously, I am a millennial myself. We focus on millennials at Through the Grapevine for the wines that we import. And my background is in digital marketing and sales. So when I speak about this, it's great because I don't just speak from the wine industry, but I actually also still consult in the realms of just general sales and digital marketing. And everyone, whether it's wine or any product, really wants to know what's going on with millennials and wants to know what can they do to essentially get into their pockets, because we spend a lot of money. So the agenda that I want to go through today, I want to initially define, who are millennials. There's a little bit of debate around that, so we'll talk about that for a moment. Then why you should care. Again, like I said, I hope I don't have to convince you that you should care about millennials, but I have some really great statistics that we can run through to kind of give you the scope of how they're buying, what they're buying, and then after that, essentially using that information so that you can access them for your brands and what do you kind of need to be doing so that you can also participate and convert them. So like I said, it's kind of funny. I've had conversations with people where they're like, I don't actually know if I'm a millennial. So for the purpose of this conversation, I generally define them as anyone born between the 1980s and the early 1990s. I picked this picture because I thought that was actually a pretty hilarious representation of how you probably would define a millennial. There's someone, they're drinking wine, they're doing whatever, and they're just constantly on their phone. So if you are somewhere in your 20s and 30s and you're just constantly on your phone, you're probably a millennial. And it's funny too, because I think that what I want to convince you guys of by the end of this is that I think a lot of people see this and it frustrates them and they think that this generation is just doing a lot of weird things and not appreciating what's going on. And whether or not that's actually true, it doesn't actually matter for us because in this industry, it is incredibly, incredibly useful for us. The fact that we use our cell phones, the fact that the way that we consume could not be more perfect for the beverage industry. The other thing that I wanted to hit on is that as of right now, they make up 25% of our current population. And obviously a large majority of the wine purchasing market. I was actually just yesterday listening to a Guildson podcast from the 2017 year in review, and what they said was millennials right now make up 32% of the wine buying population, and we're actually 42% of the profits, so something that we'll touch on a bit more as well. Slight plug here, so I am not a graphic designer, but just so you guys know, I make all of these things myself, and I use Canva. So if you guys don't use Canva, I just wanted to make a slight plug there because it is amazing. You are basically able to make whatever types of designs you want, and it's super easy to use. So if you are trying to figure out what your digital marketing strategy is and what you need to be doing, Canva is an amazing tool. It's $12 a month. So if you're not using it, you and your producer should be using it. All right, so cases consumed in 2015. Obviously, this data is slightly outdated. That's why I just gave you that stat from Jeff Kruth. But essentially, is it news to anyone, or does everyone kind of already know that millennials are actually consuming the most amount of cases of wine? I feel like you guys all probably know that, but it's important to kind of hit on this. And what I would actually guess for the 2017 numbers is this number's probably going up. I feel like in general there's generally been a focus on baby boomers. Poor Generation X, they just kind of like get stuck in the middle. I feel like we don't even talk about them as much. But the baby boomers, and then there's the millennials, and so now that the final millennial, I think, turned 21 like last year, we're obviously consuming the most. So the first thing that you would think when you see this is, okay, yes, they're consuming the most, but they're consuming, crap wine, they're doing slap the bag, and they're buying a lot, but they're not buying quality. So the next thing I always like to point to after that's really, really cool is that while it may be that we're consuming the most, we're also consuming premium. And that's something that I think that we don't normally spend a lot of time on. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that you can probably think of. We care about organic, we care about the story, we care about authenticity. These are things that I'll continue to speak about for a while. Sorry, I just realized I don't have my timer, so I don't know how long, I've been talking. Just let me know when I need to do questions. So yeah, when you look at this, generally when you think of who's going to buy a premium bottle of wine, you're normally thinking like an older white male that wants to have like a nice bottle of Bordeaux. But it turns out when it's something over $20, we're more than three times more likely than a baby boomer to actually buy a premium bottle. And that's not only interesting just because of the fact of the amount that we'll spend, but also what we'll spend it on. There's no true loyalty to, oh, I want this brand or this whatever. What they want is an experience. So they'll spend 20-something, they'll spend over $20 on some grape they've never heard of because what they see and what they're looking for is that experience around it, more so than the actual label. Going back to the fact that we drink a lot, we do drink a lot. There's a lot of us, we drink a lot, and we're drinking about 2 times as much as our parents. So that's just kind of a funny point to touch on here, and I think it's also an interesting one when you think about like buy the glass strategies or what you want to actually do with like sales at the distribution level, because I think that there's actually a lot of opportunity. Again, if you continue to build on these stories and the educational aspect of this, there's a ton of opportunity to continue to introduce millennials into literally whatever you decide makes the sense as like a story that they would probably be interested in. So if they're going to consume in a restaurant, they're less likely to buy a bottle, they're more likely to buy the glass, and in doing so, they may have, in this case, one different glass at the beginning, middle, and end. So the diversity there makes it really interesting. And we drink a lot. I don't know if that's going to change over time, but I think it's pretty funny. This one I also find very funny. So out of the actual millennial buyers, the majority of us are women, 2/3 of that. And what I thought was hilarious that the Wine Market Council also prefaced with this when they put this statistic out is that not only are we making up 2/3 of that, we're also 22% more likely to make an impulse purchase. So again, there's just good news all around for pretty much every type of producer right now and distributor and importer, because at the end of the day, we're buying on impulse, spending more, and we're walking essentially into Whole Foods or into some sort of local wine store and saying, I didn't realize I wanted a Moldovan rosé, but today that's what I think I want. Now I'm going to buy 5 bottles, even though I thought I only wanted 1 because I had a conversation and I learned that this one producer has 4 different varietals that I really want to try, yada, yada, yada. So these are things that you need to think about when you're actually creating your brand strategy or when you're working with your producers, because on the shelf, when you walk into a store, that's your opportunity for them to be able to essentially first catch their eye, and then something I'll touch on in a second, back it up with your digital presence so that when they are actually going through the process of researching and figuring out what it is they want to buy, they're going to feel comfortable making that purchase that they definitely did not walk into the store to make. They probably were not planning on paying that much money for it, but you've now justified it and introduced them to something new. So obviously, there's no way to talk about millennials without talking about social media. And this is a subject that I'll probably spend a bit of time on, both now and a bit later, because social media is huge in wine, and I know there was a great talk about that yesterday as well. But specifically in this market, what I find to be very interesting is I think these statistics are going to start changing over time. The Facebook demographic now is becoming much more baby boomers, and the millennials are shifting more into Instagram, which is now also being phased out by Snapchat and all of these other forms of social media that are out there. So one thing I wanted to hit on here that I think is a little bit interesting is, does everyone know like the difference between an Instagram post and an Instagram story? So the reason that I think this biggest change is happening is because as millennials are consuming, they want to continually be showing what is going on, but they're also afraid about security. And so they're no longer posting every single thing as it's happening and leaving it there in perpetuity. What they're doing is, a story is essentially you go in, I take one picture, and it's there for a day, and then it's gone after that. That's also how Snapchat works. So there are really two different ways that you can actually target people when you do this. And then it's important when you're creating this strategy to actually think about how they're consuming it. So I won't get too deep into all of that. If you have questions about it, I'm of course happy to talk to any of you guys about that at the end. But that's something that's really crucial. And the opportunity that's here that is so incredible that you don't get with other generations is that because as millennials consume, they want to talk about it, they want to write about it, and they want to be a part of that story. You essentially get free advertising if you do it correctly. So for example, the reason I give this example of the stories versus regular posts is, you know, our millennial woman that comes in and makes an impulse purchase of Moldovan rosé, we'll keep going with that example. She buys this bottle of wine, or first she goes and she looks at it. She's, you know, intrigued by whatever the label looks like. She reads on the back, seems like there's some sort of interesting story there. She's going to go onto her phone, she's going to go onto Instagram or Facebook, probably Instagram, look up the actual producer. She's going to realize that it's, you know, a woman producer that has 4 children, yada, yada, yada. She's in love with this woman now. She buys every grape that they have available. And then when she gets home, you didn't just successfully make that sale, but in facilitating that story for her, what you were able to actually do was allow her to feel a part of it and feel educated by what just happened. And then by giving them that information, they're going to look super cool when they go on social media and say, check out this Moldovan rosé I just had. You know, I discovered this. We like to discover things, so you have to remember that too. That's why it's really a great opportunity for people that are for, you know, different types of grapes and things that are not typical. And in doing so, they link back to the producer, they'll link back to the importer, they'll link back to whatever they actually can, wherever they got that information from. So it's an incredible exchange, and it's a win for them, and it's a win for you because they're doing that marketing for you. So we'll touch on that a bit more after this as well. So accessing millennials. We're obviously online, we're obviously in stores, and the thing that I think that's really important to discuss here is the story. So to tell you guys a bit about my background and how I started my portfolio, Amy knows this way too well because we went to Italy together, and I've basically been building my portfolio for over 1.5 years at this point. And the reason that it's taken me so long is because initially I thought I was going to do the regular type of importing where you know, go to a trade show, you meet some wines, you think they taste good, and that's kind of it. But as I was starting to build my digital strategy, after I had chosen a few wines, I realized that there wasn't a story there. And I realized that in actually going through and marketing these wines, I was not going to be doing any service, I was not going to be doing anything good for my consumers, and it was going to be actually a lot harder for me to sell. So what I focus on when I look for producers is I'm not just looking at, you know, if they have, you know, obviously it needs to taste amazing. That's the very first thing, no matter what. But beyond that, you know, do they actually have a story? And every vineyard does in some capacity. It's just about how you package it and how you distribute it to your potential consumers. So one thing that I always look at when I'm looking at a potential producer is I'll go onto their social media and I'll kind of see, is this something that already exists? Do they already have, they don't even need to have a large following. That doesn't matter at all. Actually, sometimes it's even better because then when someone discovers it, they feel even cooler about it initially. But this is like an example that I have from one of the producers I met at Von Italy this year that I'm going to be bringing in later this year. And it just continues to harp on this idea of authenticity, of the story of where did this wine come from. So if I was at the store, again, this is not Moldovan obviously, but if I was at the store and I wanted to go look up Il Monte Caro, I'm going to go in and I'm going to realize that I'm in love with this dude because he found a bunny on his vineyard, and that's amazing, and I really want to buy this wine now, and I don't care that it's $10 more than what I wanted to pay because look at him, he's so cute. And that's literally the thought process that happens when people are consuming this. So when you're thinking about who you're going to bring in, or if you already have, producers that you're working with, it's important that you guys kind of work together to get this story going, because if you don't have it, it's going to be a lot harder to initially get and then retain your clientele. Another point that I also want to sort of debunk is people always say that millennials are not brand loyal, and that's true. We're not like, my mom goes to Costco, buys a giant case of Kim Crawford, goes home, and like that's it, that's all she drinks, and that's fine. And what they say is that millennials are not brand loyal, but that's actually, I would say, incredibly false. Millennials are 2 times more likely to actually follow a brand than a baby boomer is. And that just means that they essentially are going to stick with you after. So even though they're looking for new experiences, once they're integrated into some sort of story that you've essentially built for them, you are going to have a lifelong customer if you've done it correctly. So that's why I said at the beginning, it's important when we talk about acquiring millennial customers. When I say convert, I don't just mean, woo, they got the bottle of wine, that's it. Maybe they'll go back and buy it again. I mean, they're going to be interacting with you. They're going to be commenting on, your Instagram and saying, hey, this is amazing. They may go to the vineyards. It's just really, really crucial that you actually incorporate them into what's going on with the wine. And what's so interesting about this opportunity, and why I said initially that, everyone hates the millennials on their cell phone, is that for this industry, that could not be better, because with a product that you can't actually try before you buy it, the only things you have are what the label looks like and then whatever information they can find out about it. So the more you have online about it, the more likely they are going to be able to buy it. So that's just an opportunity that didn't ever really exist before, and it's something that if you're not utilizing it, then you're missing a really great opportunity to continue to build brand loyalty and ultimately, initially make sales. And if you're an importer looking to find distributors or whatever, this is another one of those points that's also amazing, because if you have a great digital media strategy and you have some of these things going on, that makes you a really great partner. So if you're a producer, doing this stuff is really important. If you're an importer, finding people that are doing this, or finding the ones that you already love and having them kind of helping them start to do this is really great. And then if you're a distributor, you're going to love working with an importer that already has this, because it's very complicated. Who should be in charge of this? And the answer is everyone. It should be something that the entire industry is doing. We should be involved in social media. Oh, and one last thing on that too is millennials are very picky, so if you are involved in social media, it's important that it feels like it's authentically run. I'm going to continue to say these words like story and authentic, but it's true. And so if they ask questions or if they have feedback, it's really important to get back with them quickly. And that is like I said, that's one of those things where you think that you're not going to have, you think that they're just going to move on to the next thing, but if you do this correctly, you'll never lose them. then this is another subject that we can basically spend another 3 hours talking about how to actually target them. But essentially, we've already done some of the groundwork in this. So what we've been talking about since the beginning is, the presence that you guys have digitally. So the way that you can actually get to these millennials is initially, having the right type of packaging. So as you guys can probably guess, the idea of a picture of a chateau is not likely the most exciting thing for a millennial to go into the wine store and be like, ooh, this one's super interesting, let me look at that. At the same time, it's very important, again, I'm gonna go back to the word of authenticity, it's very important that you don't just put like a moose in a bathtub or something on the front of the wine because you think that's what's going to sell. It needs to go with what the vineyard is. I have I use this example because one of the vineyards I'm working with does have that. It's like a moose in a bathtub and like a fox in like a suit. But they're like incredibly hipster young men doing really funky biodynamic wine, so that's like the perfect fit. It's authentic, it's really there. If it's a more traditional, lovely family vineyard, that's great. But again, like probably moving away from just putting a picture of the house and thinking about deeper aspects of that wine. What about it makes it so amazing? Is it a part of the flavor profile? Then maybe you should embody that somewhere on it. Is it something about the story of the family? Whatever it is. Maybe it's the bunny because there's so many bunnies everywhere. I don't know, but that's like, you need to actually be ensuring that you're communicating the story that the wine should tell on the label. The other aspect of this too, beyond just the imagery, is you can obviously literally tell the story, like you have the back label to be able to outline some of these things as well. So it's great when you put the types of grapes that are on there because that is something that people are interested in, obviously. And just really anything, you'll know best. If you know your producers or you know the importers and the types of portfolios that they have, you'll be able to figure out what makes the most sense. But again, it's just crucial to have that story, make sure that story is authentic and accessible. I hope all of you right now are like on your computers wondering and like, what does my producer's Facebook look like? What is it, yada, yada, social, also the website. What do those things look like? So there's two aspects to this. You have to first build it. You have to build what does this, what should this wine story be? And after you've decided that, you should look at the channels. So how can we actually distribute this? Okay, so we should have it on the website. We should have information on social media. We should have a strategy for pushing that out. And after that's actually created, the next aspect to this that's super, super interesting and very, not as hard as I think people think it is digital targeting. So there's paid and there's earned media. Earned media means that you wrote the most beautiful prose ever about some crazy obscure grape and people are gonna end up on your website and looking at the wine. That's not something that I normally find to be that useful in the small and medium importers and distributors, because we are not, like if you're enormous, that's great because your wine is probably distributed everywhere. But if you're in a very regional market, that's actually not very useful to you. So what's really incredible about paid digital and paid content is you can get incredibly, incredibly granular on who you're actually targeting. So what that means is, like if I, for example, am going to do an event on biodynamic Italian wine in Washington, DC, I can create the amazing digital, page about whatever it is, some posts, I'm using Canva or whatever, and I make some posts about it on Instagram, on Facebook, etc. And then what I can do, and maybe some of you guys have done it, but if you have not, you'll find it to be incredibly interesting. You can go into Facebook and you can go into Instagram and you can essentially go by demographics, like incredibly painfully granular, and say, I am interested in only people that said they were interested in biodynamic wines. I only want an audience that wants Italian wines, and I only want them within the next 10 blocks of wherever the venue is. So the amazing opportunity that we actually have here is that because, because we actually are small in what we're doing, it's going to make that audience very small, which means that these types of campaigns are not even actually very expensive. When you sponsor this type of content, the amount of people that are interested in biodynamic wine within 7 blocks of Logan Circle in Washington, D.C. is probably just a couple hundred people. But those are literally exactly the people that I want to be talking to go to that event. So you may pay a little bit more for your cost per lead or to convert them, but that's unbelievably helpful because it's not mass distribution. It's not you trying to do a PR campaign or investing a crap ton of money into something that you can't actually measure the results on. Paid media is a really, really great and a bit underutilized opportunity, I think, that we've seen in this market. And it's funny too, going back to the going back to the topic of millennials, people also worry that millennials do not want to convert on paid media, but it's actually not true. If you sponsor content, they're going to be happy to receive it because, like I said, it's so granular. I said I like biodynamic wine, so if I get something that says an event for biodynamic wine, just because it says sponsored on it does not mean that I'm not going to pay attention to it. So that's a bit probably granular on the digital marketing side, and we're at about 6 minutes now, and I did want to leave time for questions, so if there's anything you guys want to talk about, or if there's a slide you want to go back to, just let me know. But generally, millennials, we are like the best opportunity that every medium-sized distributor and importer has to get like your wines and actually build brand loyalty. We spend the most, we drink the most, we are going to be around for a long time, and we love things that are educational and nothing. I don't find anything else to be more educational than wine. There's always a story involved. I find it to be, I'm also incredibly biased, but I find it to be way more interesting than things in the area of food. So, yeah, go get some millennials. Questions? Yeah. I'll repeat them. Yeah, so Snapchat's an interesting one. What he asked was, because Snapchat is more popular with younger millennials, actually, what was it? Do you think it's something to focus on now, or is it, so yeah, is it something to focus on now, or is it better to focus on things like Facebook and Instagram? In my experience, I find Instagram to be best. Snapchat doesn't have a very robust platform for doing a lot of marketing on it right now. It's amazing, like, it's a great tool, like I said, for when you share. It's amazing if you do have an account or something and they can tag your brand on Snapchat, but that's kind of the extent of it. You don't have that opportunity to get in front of them like you do on Instagram and Facebook in a paid context or in an organic context. So yeah, and it does trend younger. There's probably way more people slapping the bag on Snapchat than actually, like posting about some like beautiful, mouton or something they just bought. Any other questions? Cool. Yeah. Sure. Yep.
Guidance for how you improve efforts associated with social media and digital presence, anything towards that?
Absolutely, that's a really great question. So what he asked was, if you have limited time and resources, what should you be focusing on to actually create a campaign, like the best effort for the least amount of time and money? What I would do, and what I personally do, because I have another job besides this, so I don't have actually a ton of time and resources. I use things like Canva, and the first thing you need to do is you need to basically just have a plan. You need to invest that time and realize what is the story and what are the distribution channels that I have for each of the products. And after you have that story and that plan, spend a few hours up front making the actual content for it, pull in the photos, write what types of copy you think actually makes sense. And then you can use a ton of digital automation tools like Hootsuite or whatever. There's a ton that you can pick from, and just schedule that out. So if you just take 5 hours at the beginning of a month, actually put together something that seems like content that would make sense, and just continue to push that content live, that's the first part. And then the second part is if you can just take an hour or two whenever it makes sense, if there's an event or if there's something, a launch, whatever, like when you need like an extra push, that's when you can actually do the sponsored content. You can go in, you can do the targeting. So like I said, you have to create that kind of presence first, and then after you have that presence, you want to look at the distribution. Yep.
How much is important the engagement between after you post to follow up with the likes, with the
Yeah, that's a great question. How important is it to follow up with the likes and the posts? So it's incredibly important. And one thing that I do, I think we have like 11,000 followers on Instagram right now. And the way that I do that is I actually have, like, they're all organic. You can pay to have followers. Don't go pay to have followers. Millennials will figure out very quickly that they're bought. So what will happen is I have someone that actually manages the account for me. Every time someone follows us, we write back and we say, thank you so much for the follow. We really appreciate you checking us out. Let us know if you ever need anything. And then if they respond back, I do personally write back to them because that is very important. So yeah, you need to, if they comment, you want to write back to them and you want to be engaged. Yes?
What about celebrity endorsement?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so influencer marketing is unbelievable. If you can do influencer marketing and you have an avenue to do that, you should 100% do it. The idea, I would never pay someone to do it. Or, I mean, I guess maybe I would. It depends on the situation. But yeah, if you have a situation where you have someone that loves your wine or loves your product, generally you can just give that to them and then ask them to essentially tell the story for you. There's a lot of restrictions that are coming on now where people have to say if it's an ad. That's why I said it's better if you don't pay them, if you just give it to them and you have someone that loves your product. But yeah, one thing I didn't touch on is when I said that it's free marketing, I think the average follower size for a millennial is like a few hundred to 100,000 followers. We're incredibly good at getting followers and keeping them. So yeah, if you can have people post about it, that's amazing. Definitely do it.
Just really briefly mention digital automation tools.
Yep.
What are they?
So a digital automation tool is essentially, I'm going to write a bunch of posts, and instead of me having to get on my phone every day and actually hit post, post, post and set it up, they'll schedule it for you. So like Hootsuite's probably the best example right now. You'll go in and you'll schedule some tweets or you'll schedule some Instagram posts, and they will actually go out and post it on that date and time. On multiple platforms, exactly. So you can have one message for Facebook because your demographic there is probably baby boomers, so maybe the message you're going to use is a little bit different than what you put on Instagram, than what you put on Twitter because you're limited in characters. So you have to think through those things in advance, but it's great because you can do that in one chunk. Yep.
What's your recommendation on hashtags for Instagram?
On hashtags?
A lot of talking about hashtags that's not worth it because it's still worth it to hashtag 10 different topics. What's your input on that?
So hashtags are worth it. What you need to do though is there's a weighting system to the hashtags, if that makes sense. There's an algorithm around it. So even with 11,000 followers, if I hashtag just wine, I'm never gonna show up. I'm gonna be there for a split second and I don't have enough influence to show up at the top. So when you do hashtags, you want them to be as specific and just as specific as possible. You have up to 30 that you can use, and when you use them, make them, I would use a hashtag like DC wine or millennial wine or things where I can actually rank for them and are very, very specific to what I'm doing. So yes, they're great and you can get in front of people with it. Just don't be hashtag follow back or don't do any of the gimmicky stuff. Again, it's all about authenticity and that story. So be very specific to that post. And don't just use the same 30 every single time either because people notice it. Oh, I'm out of time. Thank you guys.